Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Embodied Blonde Show. I'm so excited to be here with my friend and fellow coach, Elsa Marie. Elsa is an astrologer, Bosswitch, clairvoyant, healer, and innovator. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
I'm so excited to dive in. To start off, I'd love for you to just kind of tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got into the work that you do today.
Well, it wasn't planned. I was in college and I was young. I was studying philosophy and logic, and I was actually the tutor. And this guy put an astrology book in my hands and said, "We can't date because this book says that you'll run away from me." And I was like, I really want to argue with this, but it was my job to teach other people that if you were going to make a sound argument, you had to have proof, you had to have really good reasoning. And I knew nothing about astrology. I was ignorant. So I couldn't argue against it until I learned something about it. And so I had time between classes in the library at school, and I would read the astrology books. And eventually, I got to one book that said professional astrologers use ephemeruses to calculate transits and create horoscope interpretations. And I was like, how come none of these other 25 books talk about that at all? And then it was kind of like destiny. Like I drove home from my college a different way to my new house, and I discovered a little astrology bookstore, and I went in there and started learning from the man who owned the bookstore, who was in his 60s at that point. And he gave me good books, let me borrow them. He knew I was a broke college kid at the time. And um, I started testing things, and he was showing me things. And I'll never forget the moment it actually, like, I was like, okay, I can't go back into disbelief now, because one of the books he gave me, called The Message in the Stars, had a section on progressed planets, and it said progressed Mercury, trine natal Neptune, and it talked about how a person would become so curious, fascinated, almost obsessed with astrology. And I um, was wondering if that had happened to me at that time. And my progressions move very slow, they don't happen to everybody. Um, and so I took it to him, and he plugged it in his astrology software, and it was exact when I had started learning about it a few months prior. And I was like, well, how could this mathematical logarithmic equation that's based on time and geometry and space be so accurate to what happened to me a few months ago if there wasn't something to this? So then
Whoa.
yeah, I was like, holy cow, mind blown. Like what? There's got to be something here. So I could no longer argue against it, because I was just building too much evidence for there being truth to it.
Yeah. Did you end up dating the guy?
Mm, no, we did not end up dating. He remained a friend. We flirted off and on for 10 years.
But he knew you would break his heart.
Well, actually, not because of that book. The book said that based on our sun sign positions, but we had some progressed composite astrology, which is pretty advanced astrology,
Yeah.
uh, also based on logarithmic time. And there was a specific aspect of progressed Venus opposition progressed Saturn. And in that case, it doesn't come together in a relationship. Like one person will be like, "Oh, I'm feeling it," and the other person will be like, "No, I'm cold now." And then it flipped back and forth for 10
Yeah.
years. We did that, and I was like, "Okay, well, I guess this is never going to come together." And
Yeah.
that's basically what I did learn.
So this is like the perfect segue into my next question is like you talk about the connection between astrology and the timing of love. How tell us more. Like how if somebody is just getting into a relationship, do you suggest that they look at how much does someone's astrological chart play into it?
Well, there's multi levels to it. Like there's the collective level, and you'll notice in collective astrology, this is usually what astrologers are writing about when they do forecasts for everybody.
Mhm.
And they're talking about what's going on. And that can, you'll notice like people will be inspired by that. And there's tones to it that everybody feels. So
Mhm.
that's the first layer, but that's not enough to like make anybody fall in love. And then there's another layer of your individual astrology, which has timing that's specific to falling in love. There's timing that's specific to getting into a relationship, and those things don't always sync up.
Yeah.
And then the other person will have their specific chart related timing. And then there's also the progress chart stuff for each individual. And that can have greater overtones for like especially large events, very significant relationships like marriages are often seen in that.
Mhm.
And there's then also the charts, the composite charts that are progressed. Those tell the story of what a relationship's going to go through. It's like a relationship roadmap. And
Wow.
um, I have seen before where maybe neither person has it timed for like falling in love,
Mhm.
specifically in their individual charts. But if their progress chart has an aspect like Venus conjunct Sun, it'll just be there already when you meet, like this feeling of, oh, we have this natural love already. It's inherent in our astrological design that's shared. So there's layers and nuances to it. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because I've had, if your charts, if the points in the chart that lead to like falling in love, getting in a relationship, match up with your partner, oftentimes that's when it syncs up.
Yeah.
Sometimes people get into a relationship without having had that falling in love period first. Sometimes people fall in love and they don't have that getting into a relationship thing happening. So it's varied.
How much do you think free will plays into it? Where like this is like this is what the chart says, but this is what these are the actions we take.
Oh, absolutely. I think we decide what to do with that energy because, you may fall in love with someone that it's just an impossible to make work situation, or, say you fall in love with somebody who's already married,
Yeah.
or, there's hundreds of examples of where like it may be your time to fall in love, but it doesn't work out and necessarily form into a love relationship that's committed.
Yeah.
And I've seen where people have the option to get into relationships or fall in love and they choose not to, sometimes based on their own conditioning or whatever reason. So I think, the I will say that 100% of the time that a person is feeling like they want a relationship or they want to fall in love, those aspects are happening. And
Mhm.
when you do get into a relationship, 100% of the time it is happening in
Mhm.
the charts reflected. But just because it's happening in the charts doesn't mean that that person has to choose that.
Yeah.
So
Have you ever seen like a couple that made it work even though their charts didn't seem compatible?
absolutely. So this is such a great question because, in my, I've been an astrologer for 20 years. In the first 5 or 10 years, I would see things and I would bite my tongue because I didn't want to be unethical, but I'd be like, I don't think this is going to work. And then later, um, after I gained a lot more experience, I would be like, wow, people really do have the choice to stay in something, even though it may not be easy or it may not be um, the type of love that is considered ideal or whatever. I've seen charts where people are married 30, 40, 50 years and there's aspects in there where an astrology book might say that that's doomed,
Yeah.
but people make choices. So I think that they work within the confines of whatever they're given, and some people will make well, some couples can make something work, like an it's considered a distressing aspect to have like Venus square Uranus in a progressed composite chart, but I've seen it work for some couples.
Yeah.
and they find their own way, like perhaps having an unusual arrangement where there's more distance or separate living arrangements or part-time work somewhere else, and that's what actually like fulfills that energy, yet it doesn't mean doom for the relationship.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's so cool. So do you kind of see astrology as more of as like a way to enhance our life and guide our choices rather than something that's kind of like written in stone?
I do think, it's interesting because I think there are some things that are just that like they're destined to happen, but I do think that we have choice, and I do think we're ultimately the creators, for better or worse, whatever we're creating, whether we're creating from fear or love. I
Yeah.
think that um, we influence our world as much as the stars influence us.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's very empowering. Um, I know we've talked about this before, but I'd really like for you to share your thoughts on twin flames and soulmates and like the difference between those two things. Uh, this question comes up a lot in kind of like the spiritual community and the relationship sphere specifically. And I really like your perspective on this. So I just love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for asking, Sarah. There's this, I think the common narrative of twin flames is that, you know, you're two souls and you feel so connected, and there's maybe like telepathic, psychic connection, or just like that complete and total like feeling of immersion, like you have to be with this person. But I don't think that that means that you're supposed to be with that person. I think twin flames are people who are here to catalyze you spiritually into growth and lessons. And oftentimes the twin flame dynamic is more like the chaser runner. Well, that's like a wounded dynamic of avoidant
Yeah.
um, or anxious attachment or disorganized attachment. And maybe it's an opportunity for you to look at that and work on those things, but I don't think that twin flames are necessarily meant to be together. And I think soulmates, which have this, you know, much more quiet, gentle feeling of comfort and calm,
Mhm.
maybe doesn't feel as exciting.
Mhm.
But like that is like, and you can see the difference in the charts. Like you can
Yeah.
see oftentimes tumultuous um, inter-astrology connections in twin flames, and you see more gentle but strong connections between soulmates. And I
Yeah.
think soulmates are what people should be looking for, even though it's not as um, exciting or as intense as
Yeah.
the twin flame.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like um a lot of the healing that many women and myself included had to do was just to stop being so attracted to the like tumultuous roller coaster, hot and cold experience of love, and to start to see like the steady, consistent follow through as what love actually is, instead of being like bored by that and way more interested in the like the chase, like you said, like the runner chaser dynamic. Like a lot of us, I think we maybe our early blueprint of love was working for it. And so that feels like love to us when it couldn't really be farther from the truth.
It's true. And in true love, you don't have to prove anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So do you think that we have multiple possible soulmates, or do you think it's just like a very limited number of people?
I think that we have multiple soulmates for sure. And also, I expand the definition of soulmate to be like even more than just romantic relationships. Like, I have a girlfriend who I consider a soulmate because we've been very close friends since we were 15 years old. And there's that like absolute feeling of like steadiness and just so much joy and compatibility in our inner personalities. And that is that's really beautiful when you experience that. And like some people have soulmates that are in their family, some people have soulmates that are chosen family. I think we do have more than one option for a romantic partner that can be a soulmate too. Just because what I've seen is that uh, I mean, there's billions of people on the planet.
Mhm.
There's just more than one option.
Yeah, I agree. I used to be very romantic about the idea and think that there was like one person that was meant for you, but I feel like that's limiting. And I also think it puts a lot of pressure on you and your dating to like find the one instead of to find a person that you fit with and that's a good match for you and that, you can really have a relationship with. So I really like that. And I like that you bring it into like a larger the larger sphere of our other relationships because I agree with that too. I think there's just certain people where it's like what a gift and like I've had those kind of friendships and like one of my sisters and things like this. So I love that. Um in your work as a coach, what's the biggest shift you see that your clients make when they're working with you?
I would say their own perception, like self-perception and what they believe about themselves is usually the thing that actually like comes first and then creates all the biggest other shifts in their life.
Do you have any like favorite stories where you've just seen like this transformation and you're blown away by it that you would maybe want to share with us?
Yeah, so I had one client who came to me with that concept of like my twin flame and was very, very just very distraught about losing this relationship in their life and was making that mean all sorts of things like and sort of had that scarcity view of like this is the one that was the one for me and now it's over and
Mhm.
I never have a chance at love again. And I think that, over the time that we worked together, we worked really deeply on her intuition development, like her own psychic abilities, her own clairvoyant skills, and her ability to trust herself. And also her concept of self-love and opening it up to, creating the belief that there was someone out there who, like we worked with, I'm someone's dream girl and she had um, a totally different like self-concept and self-love. And she told me like after we worked together that um, she just couldn't thank me enough for like how different she approached dating and men and how excited she was about her new prospects um, and how much more she trusted herself because that experience of losing the one or whatever made her feel like she couldn't trust herself, and so we just totally turned that around.
I love that so much. It's so important. That really is where it starts. So when you work with a client, you combine coaching with astrology. What does a typical session look like?
It's a little different for it's a little different for everybody, but usually we have some sort of overarching goal in mind, and that's varied depending upon the person. And then we'll look at their astrology, we'll see what supports that. We'll usually answer some questions around their timing, or maybe they're wondering like what energies are up for them. So they have some kinds of like heads up of what's going on and heads up on where they can use certain cosmic energies to their advantage. And
Yeah,
I don't really have a niche. I work with a lot of different people. I work with men and women. And we kind of start with that. And then we usually will also work on their goals, their mindset, their beliefs. Um, in some cases, we do like nervous system resetting.
yeah.
Sometimes we'll work with like beliefs and fears. Occasionally, I do energy work with clients. It's all a little different, but like it's kind of like um, we're always looking at what steps they can take little by little to reframe things, to have more empowering beliefs about themselves, and how they can incorporate astrology with that.
That's so awesome. Do you help people with business at all with their chart?
I do, yeah. I actually have two clients currently who are both opening or in the process, and now it's been several months for one and about a month for the other, where we're working on opening their own service provider business. And one of
Cool.
them is a new astrologer, so I've been helping him with expanding that and also learning the game of being a new entrepreneur.
That's so cool. Does our chart also tell us about that, like about business and money and all that stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like the other client I mentioned, she has like a very expansive aspect going on, a transit of Jupiter conjunct her midheaven right now, and she's beginning to open group courses. She is offering trainings for therapists. She does somatic trauma work. And
Awesome.
so we're working on creating offerings, and she's getting them out into the world. And we're using like I had to in this case, I'm like really encouraging her because I'm like, your time to do this is really now.
Right
So
now.
step
Yeah.
into it. Let's yeah, like so in that case, like it's very beneficial. But again, if we have free will, if you don't choose to take advantage of that, then the time goes by and it's a missed opportunity. So
It's like almost like just riding the wave of when all of that energy is supporting you, right? Or just saying like no to this wave, I'll wait for the next one. Is that like a good analogy?
yeah, I mean, definitely that's perfectly said.
Can you tell from the chart how long that time is for that person? Like
Absolutely.
down
Yeah.
to the month or
Down,
wow.
yeah, I get down to very specific. I mean, whenever we're talking about astrology transits, there's sort of like a build and then like it's I always use the analogy of like climbing a mountain and then coming down the mountain. And there's a window of opportunity there, and it's not like it ends or begins on a specific day, but it like comes on and becomes active and then wanes off. And so you want to try and hit like the peak and
Yeah.
time around that.
That's so cool. I'm learning so much, Elsa. I honestly, I know about my sun sign and my moon sign, and that's about it. And I'm like, I really don't know that much. I'm like, I'm an Aquarius. That's all I can tell you. So this is so cool for me. Um, what was I gonna ask you? Oh, so like how do you use astrology in your day-to-day life? Is it something that you tap into on a daily basis to make decisions, or do you check in less frequently, or how do you personally use it?
Okay, so I have kind of an evolution around this because when I started, I used to watch calendars that would have like every aspect for the day listed out. And so for a long time, I was just trying to like see how I observed what I would like, what does it feel like when the moon goes void, of course, or what is it like when the moon is trine Venus? And after gaining experience with that for several years, I would notice very strong trends to time. And I can notice like when the moon changes from void, of course, to going back into a sign because the energy is so different. And so I used to be very um, like I used to try to want to control as much of my life as possible. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to do this on this time and do that on this time. And like,
Yeah.
I would also stop myself from doing things. And now I'm a little bit more like, okay, well, I still won't do important things during the void of course moon. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll definitely plan things for my business at beneficial times. I try and still take advantage of like, if there's aspects that are really good for fun and pleasure, I'll try and plan a trip or an outing or a time to be social.
Yeah.
And I think like, as I get older, I let go of control and realize more that like I'm creating my experience to a degree anyways. So I still absolutely use it, but I don't go as crazy as I used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I feel like that's a really good balance. Um, what are your thoughts on Mercury retrograde? Because I know I've interviewed some people that are like, that's a bunch of like kind of bull. And like people get like way too paranoid about it. And it's actually an empowering thing. And then other people, I mean, people on the internet are like, no, it's a thing. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there is a lot of like fear-based astrology, especially around Mercury retrograde. But there are things that I've tested. Like, I mean, I have some rules around it for myself that I keep. Like, I won't buy airplane tickets during Mercury retrograde because every time I have tried it, believing that this could work anyways, those trips have been canceled, even if the trip was after the retrograde. Um,
Yeah.
I will buy tickets if I'm flying like very shortly. Like if I needed to fly somewhere and I was like, I'm buying a ticket for 5 days from now, Mercury's retrograde, I'm doing it anyways. That worked out, but I've had then like, oh, your airplane is delayed and you missed your connecting flight. But if you like take it with a smile and just be like, okay, Mercury, good one.
Yeah.
And I've also been like handed a voucher for a hotel and food stuff too. So it's like if you have this doom and gloom kind of like
Yeah.
expectation, then yeah, you're gonna probably create doom and gloom. If you have this kind of like, okay, I'm rolling with it because I know Mercury is retrograde right now, then you just laugh it off and it's not so big a deal. And then, I had one client who swore up and down, like, oh, Mercury retrograde doesn't affect me at all. Like, and I was like, are you sure? Then we were looking at his chart and um Mercury happened to rule in his chart. Mercury rules Virgo and Gemini. And
Mhm.
the two houses that landed to rule for his chart were his house of love and his house of relationship. And so he was like, yeah, I never have any technical problems or any travel problems or anything like that. But I'm like, well, let's go back and look at your dating life. And he's like, oh my God, my last relationship and the one before that both fell apart during Mercury retrograde. And yeah, because it's in an area of your life that it doesn't seem like Mercury should be connected to, but it actually like has this gigantic influence. And he shared with me like, yeah, during the retrograde, he ended a relationship and then he very much regretted it when Mercury went direct and couldn't get it back. And it's like, well,
Oh,
that was your time to review, not necessarily make a major decision.
yeah.
So I mean, without that knowledge, you know, you're just kind of flying blindly. So I think there's absolute value in knowing what Mercury connects to in your specific chart in your life.
I personally think I feel like I have tech issues, but I always do. But I feel like it's worse during Mercury retrograde. I'm like, well, and I think you can just, it's like, if you laugh it off and just roll with the punches and be like, whatever, it's fine. But I definitely think there's something to it.
Oh, definitely. I will find that a lot of times, sessions with clients are rescheduled more frequently during Mercury retrograde.
Ah,
And and you know, we're in the post shadow period of a Mercury retrograde right at the time that we're recording this. It's
mhm.
January 10th right now of 2024. And soon the Mercury retrograde will square my sun. And so I just have my eye on that day. I'm like, I'm just gonna like, keep the travel to a minimum.
Yeah.
Not expecting anything to be bad, but like if Mercury retrograde is making aspects to planets of yours that can be a sign to like lay low. Like one
Yeah.
year I had in 48 hours, I got a parking ticket, got my car towed, had a tire go flat while I was driving, like it blew out while I was driving down the highway,
No.
and had an angel stranger buy me a new tire, like just to
Oh
be
my
like,
gosh.
here you go. And I was like, because I told him, I'm like, I just got a parking ticket. My car got towed. I had to get it out of impoundment. I was driving. My tire blew. And that was when Mercury retrograde happened to be squaring my Mars, which is in my third house of like short distance travel. And the third house connects to your automobile. So it was like very specifically a hard
Oh my
couple of
gosh.
days.
Yeah.
And it's not always like that, but like sometimes you're just like, well, this is my turn to deal with this.
Oh my goodness. That's so wild. Yeah. How could you not believe in astrology when stuff like that happens? You're like, it's definite. I believe. I surrender.
Yeah. Well, it's the universe's like language of symbols and connections. It's when humans look at it, it's like so I mentioned I was the tutor for the logic class. Astrology is basically qualitative symbolic reasoning. It's like this symbol means these things, and then this symbol means these things, and this symbol means, and you put them together, and then you get a story that,
Yeah.
is a possibility. So,
And I feel like, so I grew up fundamentalist religion, reading the Bible and just being taught like, well, astrology is bad and like witchcraft or whatever. But then like the story of Christmas, the wise men found little baby Jesus from astrology,
they
like
were astrologers.
from reading the stars. And I'm like, how can it's just so wild how all that stuff is in there, but it's like, no, not that. Like, don't ignore that.
Yeah. Oh, because there's power in knowing it. And the Bible was edited for, I mean, there's so many different versions, but the King James version took out so much of the mystical stuff
Yeah.
that was in the Bible prior to that.
Yeah.
And it like Jesus was an Essene Jew. The Essenes were the mystical Jews.
Are there still, can you still find that anywhere?
The
Like the unedited?
Well, you have to go back to versions prior, and there are lots of scholars, and like I mentioned, that astrology bookstore in Madison, Wisconsin, that I'm pretty sure the owner passed at this point. He was quite old, but anyway, he was a Christian mystic, so he taught me about all kinds of biblical references that were based in astrology, and even just the whole theme of Christ being the fisher of men and the Christian symbol with a little fish,
Yeah.
um, that all and Christ's appearance in time, it all connects to the precession of equinoxes for the age of Pisces. And now we're at the end of age of Pisces, and we're on the cusp. We're in a transitional period, which Carl Jung did the calculations, and they say the dawn of the age of Aquarius is around 1960, but it's about a 120-year transition. So at this point in time, we're approximately halfway through the 120-year transition into the age of Aquarius. And look what we have emerging, like all the Aquarian themes
Yeah.
of like technology and just global connectiveness, like the internet. It's so very
Yeah.
Aquarian tech. And also the Aquarian sense of things is a little bit more like attuned to the senses. Like the glyph for Aquarius is like waves, but that's not only waves of water, it's like airwaves, signal transmission, like Wi-Fi and like thoughts. And like I think as humans, we're evolving towards, and you see this with younger people, we're evolving towards humans who can communicate with non-verbally much more.
Yeah.
And our the newer overarching themes in the collective belief system are heading towards Aquarian. Like astrology is having a massive resurgence, especially
Yeah.
among young people. Even in the last decade, it is mind blowing to see how popular it's gotten because
Yeah.
20 years ago, I could barely find anybody who believed or wanted to talk about it. And now it's around every corner and in every magazine. And a lot of that is pop astrology. So you get a lot of that, like, oh no, Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
But like how you use it is really up to you too. That's a choice and it doesn't have to be doom and gloom.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's just the spaces I'm in or that things have changed a lot, but like I remember astrology was just like the very back of the magazine, like two sentences on like this month for your sun sign. And now I feel like it has deepened so much and such a richer conversation. And people know that it's about a lot more than that.
Yeah, well, in about the year 900, there was a Roman emperor named Constantine who made it punishable by death to practice astrology or any other of the old pagan holidays or rituals or things. So in the entire Roman Empire, there was this like trying really hard to crack down. Even like the concept of birthstones, they were connected to signs, not months. And because of that ability to be put to sentenced to death by the
Yeah.
government,
Yeah.
they had to change it to months instead of signs because you couldn't have anything connected to the old. And so astrology went through this like almost dying period. And now there's this renaissance of it, this resurgent, and like texts are starting to be recovered. If we hadn't lost the Library of Alexandria, I can't imagine what astrology knowledge existed there because prior to the age of reason, um, which the age of enlightenment, where we really just actually so much was dumbed down to just what you see in the 3D world
Yeah.
and being told this one version of what God is. Um, we lost so much that was like important knowledge at that time. And now
Yeah.
it's coming back
Coming
because
back.
it's
I often think of like the witch trials as like a time in history where we lost so much knowledge of natural healing and herbal medicine. And like I read a book a while back where it was like telling the history, and it wasn't even pagan women that they were killing, it was healers. So just anyone that had any knowledge of natural healing. And it was because of the emerging profession of male doctors in Western medicine, and they didn't want the competition. So it really was like kind of like it is today about power and money, which
yeah,
is
it
so
was.
interesting.
There's a really great documentary called The Burning Times, which also reveals through going through all these European records of small towns that it was actually closer to, they estimate over because the witch trials actually extended something like 1300 years, not just like that little bit of time in
That we
Salem.
think of in Salem. Yeah.
Yeah, they not only targeted healers, they targeted single women because any woman who had lost a man but had been, had property where she lived, that was seized. Like, and she was, charged fines for being accused of being a witch. And then they would show records of like charging to arrest her and charging to jail her and charging her for the trial and seizing her property and her assets. So it wasn't just that, but those women were the keepers of all that knowledge. And then if you didn't have a man to stand up, because you maybe lost your husband, or women just have longer life expectancy, they were targets. So that it was a massive land grab, and any assets that those women had were transferred to the horrible, horrible witch hunters and the politicians, the people, usually men, who just wanted what they had.
Yeah. The government and the government, which was very intertwined with the church. So just
Yeah.
again, like power.
Yep, exactly.
It's wild. Like when you look at the history, I mean, I don't want to necessarily go down this rabbit hole, but it's like, was there ever a time when government wasn't corrupt? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it.
Well, power and greed
Yeah.
can corrupt. So
Yeah. But to bring it full circle, there's a lot of wisdom that has been lost over time. And we are in an age where it is resurfacing and people are reconnecting with nature and their innate wisdom, and like with astrology, with the stars, with our own healing abilities and like the power of herbs and plants. And so I think it is a really inspiring time to be here, and it's an inspiring it's an amazing time to be doing this work, because I feel like it's really what you do. It's very important work right now, and much needed. So
Thank
for
you.
having this conversation and for being here. um is there anything, my last question, except I will ask you like how we can find you online and plug into your work, but for somebody who's just getting into astrology, where would you recommend they start?
Um, Go beyond like uh reading horoscopes. Print out your chart, get some of the books that talk about interpretations of that. Start there. Um, Build up a concept of like what the signs are, what the planets are, and what they represent. Learning a little bit about the houses and how to read a chart. And if you want to be able to look at your own transits, how to read an ephemeris. Those would be my basic steps that I've taught in like beginner astrology classes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh,
And so how can we find you and plug into your work? And I know you do a lot of coaching in addition to astrology. So could you tell us more about all of that?
yeah. So my website is cosmicfox.co with a CO at the end. And my uh, Facebook is Elsa Marie. My website has an email list that you can join. Anybody who joins can also win a couple of or a couple times a year. I give away a free session to people that are the only way to enter is to be on my email list. It has information about my coaching, information about the healing sessions I offer. I also trained in clairvoyance and energy healing. Um, I have some more like fun, accessible offerings for intuitive readings as well, like with cards and such. Um, I do transit readings. I can do relationship roadmap readings, which are, I look at all the advanced charts for you and another person, whether that's like a business partner or a romantic relationship. And there's so much insight to be gained through looking at that. Um, yeah, I think oh, and I'm Elsa.iza.lion on Instagram.
Awesome. And I will put your Instagram link in the show notes. So anyone that wants to follow you can follow you there. And then you have a link tree, right? So they can just click on that. So it'll all be available for everybody who wants to find you. And you guys should all go follow Elsa because she's amazing and I love her. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me here, Sarah. It's been really valuable to be in your coaching containers too. I've really enjoyed them.
I've enjoyed having you. I think we've got quite the year ahead of us. I have a feeling.
Yeah, it's going to be big.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
Talk to you soon.
Right.